Timothy Coggins was 23 years old. He was stabbed more than 30 times, his body tied to a vehicle, and dragged across a field until it was left for discovery on October 9th, 1983 in Spalding County, Georgia. Investigators concluded the killing was a deliberate message. Timothy had been socializing with white women, and the men who killed him wanted to enforce racial boundaries with lethal force. The case vanished into a 4-decade silence, not because there were no answers, but because people who knew were too afraid to speak them aloud. Timothy was a black man living in Griffin, Georgia. He worked and had family in the area. He also moved in social circles that crossed the segregated lines still enforced by custom and intimidation in 1983. That social crossing made him visible to people who considered such boundaries sacrosanct. The men ultimately implicated in his murder were tied to networks of white supremacists active in the region. They did not act randomly. Their motive was ideological, aimed at terrorizing a community and preserving a racial order by violence. On the night of October 8, 1983, Timothy encountered Frankie Gebhardt and William Moore. The attack that followed was deliberate and methodical. More than 30 stab wounds documented extreme overkill. The decision to bind the body to a vehicle and drag it was symbolic as much as punitive. Those contours, the number of wounds, the dragging, the location, communicated a message to a community already conditioned by fear. Police opened a homicide file, but that file would not yield a prosecution for decades. The first investigations produced leads and local knowledge that never hardened into charges. Witnesses recalled threats and a culture of silence. Don't speak to the law, the implication went, or else. People in Griffin knew who was involved. They knew enough to point toward Gebhardt and Moore. They did not tell. The reasons were twofold: explicit intimidation by associates of the accused and an implicit calculation about the personal cost of defying a community's enforced quiet. That decision to withhold preserved freedom for perpetrators and withheld justice from a family. For 34 years, the case sat cold. The physical evidence aged, memories frayed or hardened into private testimony never given to courts. Investigative resources were minimal. The local agency lacked a dedicated cold case unit for most of that period. Timothy's family lived with the absence of formal accountability. The men who killed him lived under no immediate consequence. Years passed that might have been serviceable to the pursuit of truth. Instead, they became an archive of deferred justice. Change arrived not through an epiphany, but through sustained review. In 2016, investigator Chris Hosey systematically revisited cold files in Spalding County. He approached witnesses again, anticipating that time and age would loosen tongues and attenuate threats. The landscape had shifted. Some intimations of danger had diminished, and some residents who had once been silent were now willing to speak. Hosey cultivated informants, corroborated accounts, and reconstructed the night of October 8th and the discovery on October 9th. The picture that emerged pointed clearly at the same two men whispered about for decades. Arrests followed in November 2017. Frankie Gebhardt and William Moore were taken into custody. 34 years after the body in the field was found, the prosecution assembled a case built largely on the testimony that had existed in the community since 1983, but had not been safely collected at the time. Witnesses took the stand in 2018. The jury heard not just the facts of the killing, but the machinery of silence that had protected the killers, threats, tampering, and the social calculus that had made disclosure perilous. The trial produced convictions. Gebhardt was found guilty of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. He received life without parole plus additional years. Moore pleaded guilty to concealing a death and received a 10-year sentence. Convictions for witness intimidation underscored how the crime was preserved by deliberate suppression of testimony. The verdicts affirmed a simple truth. Time does not erase culpability, but time can postpone accountability when institutions do not sustain pressure to pursue justice. The cost of the prolonged silence was profound. Timothy's family endured decades without closure. Witnesses carried the burden of knowledge, some losing the chance to testify because they died or moved away. The men who committed murder retained parts of their lives intact for 34 years. The institutional failure to prioritize the case allowed an ideologically driven killing to sit unresolved, a reminder that delayed action is sometimes indistinguishable from neglect. The Coggins case stands as a stark example of racially motivated murder compounded by systemic failure. The FBI engaged when the case reopened, reflecting the federal interest in civil rights violations. The legal framework eventually applied recognized the racial animus at the case's core. Yet the larger lesson remains procedural and moral. Solvable cases can remain unsolved when fear silences communities and when institutions fail to renew effort over years. Timothy Coggins was 23. He was killed for existing outside a set of enforced racial boundaries. The community knew. It did not speak. A detective asked again decades later, and the truth finally moved into a courtroom. That verdict did not invent a statute or fix the systemic failures, but it did deliver formal acknowledgement. His killing was a crime, and those responsible were guilty. Subscribe to Case Files TV because a case left cold for 34 years shows why asking again matters.